Hello, my wonderful art students. Today we are going to be making texture rubbings in first grade. Second grade, you're making a tall paper sculpture, and then you're going to talk with someone about it. Third grade, you're making a map of your favorite place. Fourth grade, you're going to be illustrating a family tradition. And then fifth grade, you have a free draw. So first grade, the thing you're going to want to do first is to go around and find objects that you can place under your paper to get the texture from. So whenever you start, I would say 5 objects would be a good starting point, but really just anything that you can find that you think will have a good texture. I chose Legos, rocks, silverware, jewelry. There was just so many different things that I had to choose from, and I'm showing you several different textures as I put them under my paper. Some of them don't lay flat. You'll notice as I put the paper on my rock that I'm having to bend my paper, and that's okay. You just don't want to rip your paper, so be careful on how hard you're pressing your crayon down. And remember, in second grade we did these rubbings earlier this week, and we used things from nature, and mechanical pencils don't work as well as crayons do. Regular pencils like number 2 pencils should work fine if you turn them sideways, but crayons are going to give you your best rubbing. So if you have crayons, please use them. You want to start light and coloring on your side, and as you take and layer over once or twice with your crayon, you can add more layers to build up the texture on your paper. If you color too hard at first, you might not have enough texture showing, and your marks might cover the texture, so that's why you want to color lightly. As you're taking your rubbings, you can change the types of colors you're using, the way they're placed on your paper. If you wanted to do kind of a rubbing collage where they overlap each other, that's fine too. Do be careful whenever you're taking your rubbings that you don't actually color on the objects that you're getting the texture from. We want to make sure we take care of those. Alright, third grade, now that we are finished with our textures, I'm going to move us on to your map. So you're supposed to draw a map of your favorite place. And for me, I thought of my favorite childhood place, which was my grandparents' farm. So I'm starting out by drawing the main road that you drive on to get there, and they lived off of a dirt road, so I'm drawing that next. They had many different places on their farm, so I'm going to start by drawing their house with their driveway, and then I'm going to go ahead and add in the shed that was across the road from their house, as well as the cellar and the barn. I know what these things are, and I will go back and label them, but for me it works better if I draw the shapes and the placement of things before I label them, because if I have to stop and think about spelling and everything, I might break the flow and remembering of how they were placed at their farm. My grandpa had several pastures, which are where the cows would graze and be, so I have lots of fence around their property. They also had several patches of woods. So as you're drawing your favorite place, you want to think about what things look like from above. It's called bird's eye view. If your favorite place is in your home, then you can draw like your home layout, or if it's at school, you could draw the layout of our school or playground. But as you're drawing, you want to think bird's eye view. Okay, the house is shaped like a rectangle. The tree has kind of a natural shape. This river might be like a snake. And that's going to be how you get your shapes for your map. All right, fourth grade, you are supposed to illustrate a family tradition. We have had this theme pop up in some of our other prompts, and so I'm thinking of another one that I used to do with my extended family, and it ties into the map that I just drew with third grade. So this takes place on my grandpa's farm, and we would be in one of the pastures that had the pecan orchard. He had several pecan trees in his pasture. When my great-great-grandfather moved here from Germany a long time ago, he started a nursery business, which is raising plants and selling them. And so some of the trees and the different bushes on my grandparents' farm are still some of the original things that he brought over from Germany, which is really cool. So these pecan trees are the original trees to the property. And every Thanksgiving, we would go out and we would shake the trees and pick up pecans off the ground. And so this is one of my uncles, my Uncle Chuck, up in the tree shaking the branches, and the pecans fall down onto the ground. As the pecans fall, we pick them up off the ground and put them into 5-gallon buckets. As my grandma and grandpa got older, they used these really cool tools that had springs at the end of them. They were like long sticks with springs, and so they didn't have to bend over to pick up the pecans. They could actually use these springs to pick up the pecans for them, and then they would dump them into the 5-gallon buckets. So this is my grandma holding her bucket and picking up pecans. I come from a large extended family. I had 14 cousins growing up that would be at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and so we would sit, we would help. Afterwards, we would go to the pond and go fishing and roast hot dogs and marshmallows. So this is a really fun family event for us every year. So as you're drawing your tradition, think about what you're doing. Think about where you're at and who is involved. The details are really important in telling your story without words. So if you want someone to understand what's going on, the picture needs to show that. So for me, I told you guys, we're picking up pecans, but afterwards we would also, start a fire to roast marshmallows, to roast hot dogs. And then I'm also drawing someone fishing on the banks of the pond over here, and usually it would be like aunts and uncles or our parents helping us to fish as well, but I'm just going to include one person fishing over here to show that that was something that we did. But those details are super important when you're telling a story in your picture. It's called narrative. Okay, second grade, you guys are making a paper sculpture and it's supposed to be tall. So I'm going to show you how I might make a tall sculpture. And if you want to try to copy that, that's fine. But if you want to do your own thing and just experiment, that's fine too. So I'm going to start off by making a base, and it needs to be a rectangular prism. So it's a 3D rectangle. I'm going to start by cutting a slit on 2 of my sides on each corner, so that way it leaves a place where I can fold a tab in and tape it. And then I'm going to bend a crease in my paper so that way I have the formation of a box shape. If you have a glue stick or glue at home, that's great. Personally, if you're building something tall, tape would probably be your best bet, just because it's not going to be wet and it'll give you an immediate stick. So I'm using masking tape to tape my corners together. And I'm actually going to put it on a rectangle that's slightly larger, so that way it gives it more stability, or makes it to where my sculpture doesn't want to move as much whenever I put it on top of this. So this is the base for my sculpture. Next, I'm going to create a cylinder without a top or bottom. You can do this by cutting a long rectangle and taping the ends together. Since my cylinder doesn't have tabs that I can tape down, I'm going to use masking tape, and I'm going to run it from the side and then stick the bottom part to the top of my square base at the bottom. When you're taping forms together, you don't just want to tape two sides, you actually want to try to do 4, maybe even more depending on the forms that you're putting together. For my cylinder, I did one on top, bottom, and then left and right. So it's like north, south, east, west. So our sculpture is supposed to be tall, and I think an arch will give me some height without it being real wobbly. So I'm going to take a long rectangle and tape it to the one side and then the opposite side of my cylinder, and it's going to leave me with an arch that goes across my cylinder. So our goal is to make this tall, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's our only goal. We want it to look interesting too. So I'm going to add some interesting space by taping 2 circles together, but going in opposite directions. So we start out by making 2 short cylinders. So you cut out 2 long rectangles and tape the ends together. But whenever you tape the second end together, it should crisscross over the top of the other, like you see here, and then the tape should connect it to the other circle. And I'm going to add that on top of my arch. Whenever you're making a paper sculpture, it's really fun to experiment with folds. So I folded my paper a few times, and I figured out that if I put them together, then I can make kind of like a star shape. So I'm going to put that on top of my 2 cylinders that are intersecting each other. As I'm assembling these, something I want to mention is that if you want to color your paper ahead of time, please feel free to do that. I was lucky in that I had paper that I had done my rubbings on, so I just used those different colors and textures in my paper sculpture that I'm making with you guys. So please feel free to color your paper before you even start sculpting if you want to. The final thing I'm going to do is to be adding a rod on top of it. So I'm going to make my rod of paper by rolling it kind of tight. I'm going to have to add my paper rod a little differently than my other pieces, and almost immediately I noticed that it is not going to stand straight up because I rolled my paper and it's too heavy, so it's just going to have to be slanted. When your sculpture is finished, place it in different places in your house and think about where you think it will fit best. The lighting, what's around it, those are all important things. Thank you for creating with me today. I wish you well, my wonderful art students.